Well, hello there to all the good people of Ohio and beyond. This is Aaron Knapp, and you're tuned into Unplugged, broadcasting without permission. This is a place where the truth gets louder and we dig deeper, and where we always remember be lawful, not awful. If you want the full stories, the documents, the videos, and everything they don't want you to see, head on over to AaronKnappUnplugged.com, my new home for every investigation, every episode, and every update. And while you're here, be sure to like the video, follow the page, and hit subscribe, and share this with someone who needs the truth. We're building something real here. We're building something fearless, and we're doing it together. Welcome to Unplugged. Let's kick this thing off. Well, hello there to all the good people.
Plug with Nap. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Nap. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop.
Well, good afternoon there, Lorain. Happy Monday. It's getting close to Christmas. Hope you got all those gifts bought, wrapped and under the tree. Everything taken care of before Christmas Eve. It's been a little dreary out there lately. I know that everyone's probably thinking I'm going to talk about the whatever's going on over there, and I'm not. And I don't really care what anyone thinks. I made my statement online. I shut off comments on that one. Someone had made a comment about me losing. I don't care. I'm going to lose every physical fight ever. So that's as much as I'm going to talk about that. Today's little episode is going to be about records. We're going to talk about records requests, how they've been going on, how the city, the county, how everyone except for the state and a few people seem to be just way off based on records requests, the way they handle them. And it's uniform across like this. Just the playlist is crazy. So we're going to talk about that today. I'm going to talk about like how this isn't really a personality issue. It's more of a compliance issue, right, folks? Like we're going to start this by, the only honest way it can be started. And that's because anything softer allows the people to hide behind tone instead of conduct. This episode is not, about me being angry or persistent, which I get it. I kind of am. Or asking too many questions, which apparently I do. Or making people uncomfortable, which I know I do. It is not about whether I'm nice or I ask nice enough or I wait patiently enough or knew my place, right? Like, there's always that talk, he should know his place. Oh, that's better. And I just kind of go, it's about the Ohio Public Records Act, right? It's real. And whether it is conditional on who is asking or how inconvenient the answer might be, right? Here's the baseline rule that every public office understands when it benefits them, right? If a law applies to the public, it applies to the government too. There's no asterisk. It's not like, my team, Barry Bonds and his little records. There's no footnote at the bottom that says, hey, there's no personality exceptions. No clause that says records only have to be released if the requester is agreeable, differential, quiet. The Public Records Act does not regulate personalities, folks. It regulates conduct. And conduct, I'm going to walk through slowly and specifically, is a pattern of delay, denial, deflection, shifting explanations, institutional resistance that repeats itself so consistently across the city of Lorain and Lorain County that it can no longer be explained away as any sort of coincidence anymore. It's or a workload issue or a misunderstanding, right? At some point, the repetition becomes the policy. Every single one of these issues begins in the same way with all of you, me, other people in the county. I've seen other people's records requests, right? I poke my head into them all the time because eventually someone will get frustrated and just CC me in on the request. Now, explain to me why the second they CC me in on the request, the public, records agency usually gives them or gives me what I want, and then I give it to them. Just happened. I just poked my head into a records request, and I got it and sent it to the person that wanted it. Every single one of these issues begins the same way, folks. I or someone else submits the request. It's not a fishing expedition, not a demand for the impossible. It's not a request designed to overwhelm them. We're asking for email communications, records that document public business, created or received by these public offices or these public systems. This is the core category of public records under Ohio law, folks. The category agencies rely on every day when they need information from one another or from the public. And that's why I said it comes back on them with the public thing. So what should happen next under the statute's not complicated. Records are supposed to be promptly prepared and then made available. If an exemption applies, it must be cited. If only part of the record is exempt, then that part can be redacted, not the entire document. No responsive records exist. That statement must be true. It must be promptly means without unnecessary delay, not when it becomes convenient, not after pressure is applied, not after the chief retires. What actually happens instead of is delay. And for those of you watching outside Lorain County, in Ohio and beyond, well, it's not going to apply to you much in Ohio and beyond. Well, just in the state of Ohio, yes, but outside the state of Ohio, you have to look at your individual state's laws and your individual state's records. Now, Ohio has a very specific set of records requests and rules. They have a very specific way of going about things. If you're outside this area, you may move here and think you can do a FOIA, FOI, Freedom of Information Act. But here in Ohio, they don't call it that. They call it sunshine laws. And so what actually happens instead of them just coming right forward with the records, and again, I imagine this is happening in cities and counties all across Ohio, because I've had other advocates from other areas reach out to me and say, hey, look, they're not giving me this. And then I've requested that document from an outside the area agency who's then given me the document to give to the individual, either the journalist or whoever it is that's asking for the document that they want to refuse. That's just straight up wrong. But hey, what actually happens instead is they're delaying, not a day, not a week, sometimes months. And that's where this intent starts to matter, right? Because delay is not neutral when it happens over and over and over again, right? Delay is not harmless when it becomes routine. Delay is not accidental when it appears across documents, across offices, across years, involving different custodians who somehow all land on the same behaviors. Come on. It petticoat on down, everybody has the same playlist. They don't change the script. I can lay it out. The first response is almost always silence, right? This will be a while. Then after some follow-ups, the response would be vague, right? Records are under review. Someone is searching. My favorite one, IT is involved. Legal needs to review. None of these phrases appear anywhere in the statute as lawful reasons to withhold records. They're stall tactics and stall language. They're placeholders. They're just to buy time while accountability waits in the wings. Eventually, one of three things will always happen. I am told no responsive record exists. I'm told the records exist but are exempt under a citation that doesn't actually apply to what I was requesting. Or I'm given a partial production so heavily redacted that it raises more questions than answers. I think it's in Braille, accompanied by a closing statement declaring the matter resolved. Well, unless, of course, it's like Tim Williams or James McCann's or Joseph Levett's, or no, not Joseph Levitt, Rocky Raddiff's social security number, home address, and information, or certain law enforcement's information. Then they just screw the redactions up so I can see them, and then I have to go through a whole nother process to report those to their legal department so that they can get the appropriate disclosures out to those individuals and make sure they get credit protection because they've now disclosed their emails to me and God knows who else every time they've sent that out. So, and I know that because I went back and looked at one of the ones I had received before, and they sent the same redacted copy when Garen asked for it with the information exposed. And I was like, yeesh. So, that's really the other part of this whole thing that's kind of funny. is they've released their own records illegally to me and Garen and God knows who else. I'm just honest and I call and tell them when they've done it. And that's where it stops being subjective, folks, because in multiple instances, records that were claimed not to have existed surfaced through other agencies or other requests or other productions. Emails that supposedly were not, there suddenly just appeared. Poof, magic. When another office releases them accidentally or on purpose because they're required to, or when related records reference them, right? Well, it's talking about those records right here. Kind of like with when Levette kept telling me that there was no police indexes, and yet I had references to them. That's not confusion. It's not oversight. That's false representation about the existence of the public records that you're asking for. That's something you can't do, folks. It's just not okay. Hold on. It's going to come as soon as I start to talk. Ohio law does not allow that. And if a public office says no records exist, and they do exist, that's not discretion. That's a violation. Man, I think I need to take an allergy pill. I feel like I need to sneeze. This is the point where the labels come out, right? This is where I get framed. Aaron's difficult. He's the problem. I just won't let things go, right? You notice what never, ever, ever happens, right? No one ever says I'm wrong about the statute. No one comes back and goes, hey, you're wrong there on that statute, right? Hey, you got that case law wrong, right? No, they ignore it. They don't say, no one ever talks about the exemption or how it applies or explains how, right? No one ever says, hey, the promptness requirement was met or wasn't met. Instead, the conversation shifts away from the law and toward Aaron and my character. That alone tells you something's wrong, folks. The Public Records Act does not give two fucks about who I am. It doesn't care if I'm a journalist, a social worker, a private citizen. It doesn't care if I'm polite, frustrated, relentless. It doesn't contain a behavioral qualifier. Records are either public or they are not. They are either promptly produced or they are not. Once you strip away the defensiveness, the excuses, the attitude, the core question becomes unavoidable. Why does it take months to produce emails? Emails are searchable. Emails are sortable easily. Go into your own email box and do it right now. Emails are retrievable. This is not paper in a basement like over in Sheffield Lake. This is literally a digital communication on managed servers used every day for official business. When months pass before emails are produced, the question is no longer about workload. The question becomes about what's in those emails that you're so afraid to release to me? What did Mary say? What did all the people in the law department say when you made me ask for 13 individual requests? Which again is beautiful. For the record, folks, we're going to stop for a second here and just say this. If you are making requests, you should always make multiple requests instead of trying to bunch it into one, right? If you got 5 things, give 5 requests. That way, when they fail to fill 5, it's 5 things because the max you're going to get is $1,000 per claim. So if you're going to make it worth your while, do all 5. That way, at least it's, $1,000 per claim, you get $5,000. But that's if you're doing it for that reason, I guess. The law is it, but you got to do it for that reason because you got to hold them accountable. The law is explicit about what does not justify delay, right? Embarrassment's not an exemption. Optics aren't an exemption. Fear of scrutiny is not an exemption. Concern about how something looks in hindsight, it's not an exemption. If the emails are routine, release them. If they show poor judgment, release them. They show coordination that contradicts public statements, release them. They show retaliation, release them. That is the entire point of transparency, folks. That's it. When months pass before records are actually released, the damage is already done. Reporting is already delayed. Accountability is already blunted. Public understanding is shaped by the absence instead of the evidence. That's not an accident. That's structural advantage created by the delay, right? They delay giving me all this damaging information till they get to a point where they've got their little Muppets out there, little Miss Piggy out there going, Kermie, I love you. Kermie. Oh, that's my Kermie. Ah. Hey-ho. Anyway, listen, I just know that once you see the pattern, repeat itself across offices, years, across custodians. You stop pretending it's about inconvenience, folks. It's about control. They're trying to control the narrative. They're going to control me. They want, hey, Aaron's this, Aaron's that. Fine, I can stay home. I can chill right here and do what I need to do. And I'm still going to do what I'm going to do, whether I'm part of your establishment or not, whether I'm your friend or not. You know, for all these people that want to hate me in public, I got so many people in my inbox that privately have helped or done things with me. And then suddenly I'm too toxic, so they're going to chuck me off. Takes friend Patrick Horn. Just posted that the other day. What the city of Lorain does, though, is the delay as a strategy. It's not an accident. Because when we talk about public records problems in Lorain, we have to stop pretending the city of Lorain is just struggling to keep up, folks. Struggle implies that they're putting some sort of effort into it, right? Because what's happening here is something entirely different. What's happening is repetition, and repetition, especially when it spans departments, officials, and years, stops becoming that mistake and it starts becoming a policy. Every time I request records from the city of Lorain, the same cycle begins anew. The request is acknowledged or ignored. And if it's acknowledged, it's framed as burdensome, complex, requiring extensive review, even when the request is narrow, specific, and time-bound. Because I've gotten good at this point, right? Emails named or emails between named officials, communications referencing named subjects, records that by their nature already exist in the organized systems because the city relies on the same systems to function, right? Then comes the delay. Weeks will pass, sometimes months. Follow-ups are required, not to narrow the request, but not to clarify scope, but simply to find out whether anyone's actually doing a fucking thing about it, right? And then finally I go, oh yeah. Well, when they finally start to respond, they're like, rarely is that grounded in the statute. Instead, they're vague references to, oh, well, you know, they need to be reviewed, legal consultation, IT limitations, as if those phrases magically suspend the Ohio Revised Code, please. Let me be very clear about this. There's no IT exemption in the Public Records Act ever, anywhere. There is no, well, legal needs more time exemption. There is no, well, we're uncomfortable with what these emails might show exemption, right? A public office does not get to delay disclosure because it's inconvenient or because it reveals internal dysfunction. And yet that's exactly how the city of Lorain operates consistently. Emails are treated like contraband. Requests for communications trigger defensive posture instead of compliance. Entire email chains are delayed, withheld, or selectively redacted. And even though Ohio courts have been crystal clear that the emails documenting public business are public record, the expectation of privacy on a government email server is minimal to non-existent. And when the content relates to their official duties, officials don't get to use email systems and be like, oh, well, I got personal confidentiality on every stuff. I don't want you to know what I was doing. That's where the pattern becomes unmistakable. The pattern and the same names keep appearing. One of them is Brianna Dole. Brianna Dole, our clerk of council, her name surfaces across matters involving affidavits, charging decisions, administrative actions. Yet when records documenting how those decisions were made or requested, the response is resistance every time. Not explanation, not transparency, flat out resistance. She delays everything. And then the law department plays a central role in that because they're so deeply inverted from what the law requires. Instead of acting as a compliance facilitator, ensuring the city meets its statutory obligations, the law department functions as a choke point where all requests stall or die. Decisions disappear there in the black hole of the Lorain Law Department. Exemptions are stretched so far beyond their limits there that if you let them go, they knock someone out with them. And exemptions and explanations shift depending on which justification sounds more defensible in the moment. Like, that sounds right. Let's throw it to the wall and see what shit sticks to it. That's Lorain Law Department on records. I mean, it cracks me up that Riley suddenly is getting so self-righteous about text messages when he's been denying. All these people have been denying. And while Riley will always say, just like recently Brianna's been saying, well, I'm not the custodian of those records. The Ohio law is clear. It doesn't matter if you're the custodian. You're the required person at that moment to make sure you find me the custodian. It's not my job. It's your job. If you don't like that, change the law. I'm not being nitpicky. I'm following the law. Then you turn around and you go over here to the other side of things. And, so everyone in the chain says legal says send it to them. But then when you ask legal says, well, I'm not the custodian of those records. Well, but run around. So another name that I see all the time is Joseph Levesque. His name appears repeatedly in contexts where legal authority, representation, and decision-making overlap with public accountability. When legal advice is given, when actions are authorized, when public funds are implicated, those communications do not become immune to disclosure simply because they involve an attorney. It's not how it works. The attorney's involvement does not convert public business into private conversations. Ohio law does not recognize a blanket attorney-client shield for government emails that document policy, coordination, or administrative action. Then there's city IT, which again has become the most convenient hiding place in this entire operation. IT is cited as the reason emails cannot be retrieved quickly. It's cited as the reason search takes months. IT is cited as the reason productions are delayed, but here is the reality no one wants to confront, folks. The city of Lorain cannot retrieve its own emails in a timely manner. Then either the city's systems are so catastrophically broken, and you'll need a lot more than the 40 grand just to prove that it cannot lawfully function, or IT is being used as a way that to cover for intentional delay. Neither explanation is acceptable. I mean, you give me a day and I could figure it out. If you give me a day in your system, I guarantee it. I can find every email I'm looking for. And there should be nothing redactable in there because you're not supposed to put redactable crap inside of emails within city open policy procedure. I mean, like everyone knows that. You got to lock that stuff up. You got to send it secure. You can't send that in open emails. It's one thing to say I can't have reports. If you wrote stuff in open email that you weren't supposed to, that's on you. But it's not about a technical difficulty. It's emails are searchable, they're indexed, they're stored. They rely on email every single day to conduct all their business. Yet they can't seem to respond to one. I mean, Angel said it best in the video when he was harassing me at a polling site, just like Tia admitted to. You guys look it up. Ask if you can confront someone inside the neutral zone inside of a polling place while they're either going to vote or stumping, if that's legal. Especially in one individual's case who admitted on a podcast, she pulled up in front and was just yelling stuff out. That's called, polling fraud, or I don't know. There's a word for it. I'm not an expert on this, and I'm sure it's a minor fraud, but you're not supposed to do it. That being said, suddenly this whole system falls apart when we ask questions that they don't feel are credible. And the answer that they're saying that the system's trashed isn't credible. Like that's where the question sharpens. What's in those emails that they don't want to give me that justifies months of delay on Mary's emails? And on the law department, because initially the law department was like, no, you can't have any of them. And now they're like, now we got to wait on IT. Because the law doesn't allow delay to protect embarrassment, folks. The law does not allow delay to prevent scrutiny. The law does not, allow delay because someone might look bad in hindsight. The Public Record Acts exist precisely because hindsight matters. Because accountability often only becomes clear after we've already done something, after the fact. So when the city of Lorain waits months and months to produce emails, sometimes people are out of office. The harm is not theoretical. Reporting stalls. Investigation slow. Public debate is distorted. The narrative is controlled by the absence instead of the evidence. And that's not neutrality. That's advantage. And, when I press for compliance and when I cite the statute, when I quote the law back at them, the response is not correction or cooperation. It's attitude. It's defensiveness. It's implication. I'm framed as unreasonable for expecting the city to do what the law requires. I'm treated as if persistence itself is misconduct. Really quick, I'm going to point out, though, now we're talking about the law. So for the record, when I say these things in my podcast, and I say, if I were you or I'm doing these things, I'm not giving any of you folks out in legal land, la land out here, legal advice. I want to be clear, as I always have been. I am a licensed social worker. I am not a lawyer. If you're coming to me for legal advice, even as an advisor, you're coming to the wrong person. You shouldn't be going to me ever for legal advice. Anything I would write would be for entertainment value only, folks, because I am not a lawyer. Now, have I represented myself in a lot of cases in the my custody battle and been all the way to the Supreme Court of Idaho multiple times? Yes. Do I know how to write briefs and things of that nature as they apply to me as a pro se litigant? 1000%. Am I capable of giving you, Joe Schmo, the public, or anyone in my circle adequate legal advice that would stand up under the scrutiny of law? No. So if you came to me and asked me what should I do with this letter from a lawyer, my first response would be go to your lawyer. My second response would be I got one for you. But I just want you guys to understand that, like, I heard someone recently say, well, he's always, giving me. I'm not giving you. I'm not giving you especially. Yeah. No, you. Definitely you. I'm not giving you legal advice, right? Never am. Ever. I'm not a freaking lawyer. If you come to me and you expect good legal advice, you're getting the wrong person. I am a social worker. I do understand social worker. I don't understand how law affects my clients, myself. But understanding and knowing the law doesn't make you legal to practice it. I am very knowledgeable of the law. And you might find that some of my opinions line up with whatever lawyer you talk to. Is that going to make it any better or worse? No, you can't just go to court and say, well, Aaron said. It used to be like back in the day, there was this commercial that would be like, for, I think it was a tax service. And they're like, H&R Block will not, will provide, we'll go to court with you in the instance of an audit. And then they go, not as legal counsel. All right, what? As a well-dressed friend? You're just going to sit beside me? Like, what do I need you for there then? Why are you saying that? Because that's all I would be, is a well-dressed friend and a cheer support for you. Now, you need social work resources. I can only provide the base minimum of those without supervision, so I will follow those rules too. But here's the problem for them. The law doesn't require me to be patient with their unlawful delay. It doesn't require me to accept their shifting explanations, and there are a lot of them. It doesn't require me to stop after an office gets uncomfortable. It requires the government to comply. At some point, delay stops being accidental. At some point, the repetition becomes the evidence. At some point, the only honest question left is the one that they don't want to answer. What are they hiding in those emails from Mary and everyone else that they're once again denying me after months and months and months? On top of that, they're trying to send them to her for review of redaction. Come on, guys. All right. That brings us to the top of section 3. I will be right back. I'm going to play a quick ad and grab another drink, and I will be right back, folks. So stay tuned in. Here at Unplugged with Aaron Knapp, we like to thank our sponsors. We have a few unofficial sponsors tonight, and they are definitely not paid sponsorships. I want to throw out there a big thank you to Joseph Jones and Eric Jones of the Lorain Daily and the Vermilion Daily. They have a local news page. You should check them out. They do plenty of great work broadcasting all the news that is the news that you want to have in Lorain and Lorain County. So check them out. Also, please, if you need any legal services, feel free to reach out to Robert Gargas. You can find him listed online. He's a fine attorney and comes highly recommended by yours truly. And last but not least, I want to mention D&C Radio. Please make sure you check out one of the up-and-coming internet hip-hop stations and all of their shows. They put on a lot of shows. You have the Never Outdone show. You also have the Eric Bowen show, Speak Up, Speak Out. So please make sure you guys check them out as well if you're looking for your latest and up-to-date hip-hop artistry.
Thank you for tuning in. This has been a non-paid sponsorship brought to you by Unplugged with
Brought to you by this jackass. That's right, folks. This jackass brings you those statements. Anyway, gotta have a little levity once in a while, folks. You gotta enjoy yourself. So next, we're coming up on the Joseph Levesque, the McCann emails, and everything that was, and wasn't. And I know you guys have heard about the emails and everything that I've been bitching and moaning about, but suddenly new people come along and they start to realize you exist, start to get more followers, you start to get out there more, and you start to reach a bigger audience. And in this case, we're not getting we're not getting in depth about what the emails really said, right? Because I've addressed the McCann emails said situation so many times. When people go, "What's going on?" That's why I get frustrated, because I'm like, well, look, there's like a million things online. Nobody watching this wants to hear that story again. And so I'm not going to tell it again. But I'm going to say that Joseph Levesque and the McCann emails and the way that they did not exist until magically they did. And this fell into a lot of people's laps in the county or the city's administration. And I get it. I get it. Yeah, did Bradley really know? They all really knew what he did, because everybody knew what his reputation was. You can look no further than the Middlebrooks IA report that yours truly released to the public, that you were never meant to see, that he was given, that was given to me with all the extra information. I mean, again, you want to talk about being angry at somebody. You guys should be angry at other people. All I've done is give you the fucking truth. You want to go online and talk shit about me? You want to do more people do whole podcasts about me. Let that sink in. Somebody did 3 whole podcasts about me. And now you got people that want to come on my page and all this stuff. All I can say is, thank you for the extra. Every time you do one, my spikes just go way up. And in the grand scheme of things, I have friends. Everyone's out here. I shouldn't say everyone. The few people that probably watch and that are doing what they're doing over there are acting like it's the end all be all, that suddenly it's going to make me sad and I'm going to just leak off into the sunset at 52 years old and care suddenly about everyone else's feelings and thoughts and feelings. No, none of us are really going to be that into everything going on around us, right? At a certain age, you should have a smaller friend group. You should have, a group of trusted people that you can talk to, some good legal advisors that can help you out. Preferably one with a law degree. I'm just saying, and for the record, I believe my daughter is kind of a little bit older than someone's son. But wow, the fact you would bring my kid up and you keep selling that tired old myth. Anyway, I'm sorry, I digress. You look at the way they all handled those emails from McCann, and everyone just said, "Oh, they don't exist. They don't exist. They don't exist." Right? It's not even a close call. It wasn't a gray area. It's documented sequence where records were denied, minimized, or declared non-existence, and they only surfaced later because the one person controlling the denial was no longer in office, and that was James McCann. And I want to take a second to truly thank. And I know I don't do this enough, and I know that if we're going to use the excuse everybody makes mistakes, I get that. Everyone makes mistakes. And especially when it comes to people who may be of different backgrounds, races, sexualities, whatever your difference may be. I understand sometimes it's really hard to speak up against those in power and in authority. And oftentimes people would say, well, why wouldn't someone like Middlebrooks have spoke up before, or even a Chief Fowling who was underneath McCann? Well, when you guys look at the institutional rot that's taken hold in all of these areas, not just here, but all over Ohio, all over the United States, you start to see Rome becoming Rome. It's scary. And what I see here is institutional fear from everyone on down. The fact that McCann had control of all these people, I get Joseph Lex, a younger lawyer. McCann was McCann, folks. I've never seen, tip my hat to the guy. I never had a more formidable whatever you want to call antagonist. I mean, I don't really consider him my foe. He did what he did. Early on in that conversation, I told him what was going to happen. We'd both end up unhappy and unemployed. Ta-da! I hate being right in that moment, but I get why people like Levesque and even Bradley and even Carry On would all try to support McCann. And, you know, I mean, because the black eye of the city, I always look at it from two sides of the coin. On one hand, yes, their duty is to call these bad things out. And then, much to Garen's disbelief, I'll also say their duty is also to protect the taxpayer and the taxpayer's dollar. And to make Garen happy again, I'll come back and say, but you also do that by being honest and telling the truth and not putting yourself in a position to have these things happen. Imagine a world where he doesn't do that. Or as one of my friendly council people said to me, imagine a world where McCann gets drugged down by his ear by Bradley and has to apologize to Aaron. Would have been a simple task. Others want to sell me as the bad guy for going after the chief of police. You mean the chief of police who illegally went after my license and then convinced a certain person to go after my license too, who then wrote emails and did that to go after my other license and failed? So Joseph Leck was serving as the law director of the city of Lorain, which I think, I mean, the assistant law director, and I think he still is. Not real sure because this isn't a story about him completely. So we really don't want to get into the Sheffield Lake conundrum, but I do believe he's working there now as well. So requests for emails involving Chief McCann, particularly emails referencing me, my licensure, my mental health, my access to city buildings, and alleged incidents that never occurred, were repeatedly met with resistance. Now, sometimes the response was that no responsive records existed. Other times the response was delay without explanation. Other times the response relied on broad assertions of privilege or investigatory exemptions that didn't match the content being released. I must say that was my intro to 101 to public records in Ohio was James McCann. I went and just started reading, and I'm a voracious reader. And so I just went in and read everything on public records law, took every class, took every single session. Yes, Mr. Individual, whose name I won't bring up anymore, I do sit around reading stuff and rules and regulations and contracts for 16 hours. I'm not looking for fault. I am what you would call a watchdog. I'm a meter for government issues that could happen, that could waste the tax dollars of taxpayers of Lorain, where you don't even live, either of you. I mean, for the record, I'm the only one that lives in the 6th Ward. But what matters here is not the tone of disagreement over my interpretation or anyone's interpretation. What matters is the factual posture the law department took at the time. The position taken was that McCann's emails didn't exist, or they couldn't be found, or at one point they weren't subject to disclosure. Those are what Joseph Levesque had, was saying. And at the time, he, much like now Nietzsche, had direct authority over records compliance, legal review, and the framing of the responses to these public records requests, right? Then something suddenly magically changed, right? After McCann retires, all the emails involving McCann began to surface. These aren't hypotheticals. They're not summaries. They were actual emails. Communications that had previously been denied or obscured suddenly became producible. And the city's position shifted from those records do not exist to here are the responsive records without any credible explanation or why records that allegedly could not be found suddenly appeared. And that's when I go back to what I was stating earlier about how some people get controlled by the chain of power. I want to explicitly give a thank you and a shout out to Chief Fowling for being forthcoming and providing all of those emails, doing what the law required. I also want to thank you and Assistant Chief for when McCann went on vacation and you gave me the videos from City Hall where I was being accosted by Lieutenant Swanger. Mathewson and Fowling, constant attention to records and records details, regardless of what others may think about them, has won them several victories in my book. And I must say thank you to both of them for their explicit, following of the rules in those areas, regardless of whether it helped or harmed them. They gave me what I was asking for and was required by law, up to and including those Rivera records, which I don't think would have ever been released under Chief McCann. So kudos to those two gentlemen for doing the right thing and giving me the records. But that sequence matters, folks, because it matters because to a Public Records Act, it doesn't allow a public office to deny the existence of records that do in fact exist. And it doesn't allow an assistant law director to shield records through delay until some personnel changes happen and make it continually untenable to deny it, right? And it certainly does not allow selected disclosure based on who's in the chair when the request is made. If they were releasable then, they were releasable now. And if they were findable then, they're findable now. But that's not speculation. That's the timeline. Requests were made, denials were issued, time passed, leadership changed, records appeared. Period. That's what raises the question the city of Lorain's never answered. If those McCann emails existed all along, then why were they denied when Joseph Levesque was assistant law director or acting as assistant law director on behalf of McCann? If they didn't exist at the time of the denial, how did they magically appear later? If the explanation is that searches were inadequate, well, then the law department wasn't exercising reasonable diligence, which in itself is a violation. If the explanation is exemptions were misapplied, then the denials were unlawful. If the explanation is that the records were deliberately withheld, then we are no longer talking about a mistake. We're talking about obstruction. That's what makes this especially troubling and is the content of the emails themselves. They weren't just trivial communications. These were emails involving a sitting police chief communicating about a private citizen, a licensed professional, and a whistleblower. They referenced licensure, mental health insinuations, just like other people continue to do, alleged trespass claims, and coordination with other offices. These are exact types of records the Public Records Act exists to expose, right? They're not just there to expose the frilly ones where it says, hey, make sure you sign that budget, because that goes to the heart of how power is exercised and how narratives are constructed inside the government, especially in Lorain. Emails like these do not become less public because they are uncomfortable or illegal. They do not become exempt because they reveal poor judgment or are illegal. They do not become shielded because they implicate senior officials or are illegal. This is not one of those this looks bad exception under the laws, right? There isn't an exception under the law that says this looks bad. Yet during Levesque's tenure as assistant law director, while McCann was in office holding chief of police, that's exactly how he treated it all. The law department's role was not to protect individual officials from accountability. It was to ensure the city applies and complies with state law. When records are denied that later surface unchallenged, unchanged, just there magically, the credibility of every denial issued during that period collapsed. Not just that one, all of them. The presumption shifts. The benefit of doubt disappears. There's no more benefit of doubt. And this isn't just limited to McCann emails alone. The same pattern appears across where other records are denied and delayed during that same time period. The same language, right? Always the same language, the same posture, the same insistence that nothing exists until suddenly something magically does. And that's why delay matters, folks. This is why denials matter. This is why the personnel changes matter in public records cases. And because when compliance improves only after someone leaves, it suggests that it was a barrier that wasn't legal, right? It was a human barrier. Public records law is simple on this point, folks. It's very simple. A record either exists or it doesn't. If it exists, it must be produced unless a specific lawful exemption applies. That analysis does not come or change because a chief of police retires. The law doesn't evolve overnight. What changes is the willingness to provide it. And once the willingness changes, the past denials are exposed for what they are, right? And the bottom line is you get to the city, the IT, the myth of the technical delay, right? How we're always waiting on IT at the city of Lorain. I swear to God. After Joseph Levesque's denials and the later appearance of emails that allegedly did not exist, the city of Lorain shifted to a different tactic, right? One that's neutral on its face but functions in the same way in practice. That's the tactic of that's routine here in Lorain. It's city IT as the reason public records cannot be produced promptly. Records, requests for emails, logs, communications, they're acknowledged, installed. The explanations, well, IT's pulling the records, running searches, or working on retrieval, like it's Matt Damon on Mars. And at first glance, that sounds reasonable. Government systems are large. It takes a while, right? But it starts to collapse a little bit when that pattern, it just becomes a pattern all the time rather than an exception, right? That's what they always say. The city of Lorain does not operate on a bespoke intelligence agency with classified archival systems. It uses standard government email platforms with built-in search functionality. Keyword searches across defined date ranges are not novel, experimental, or labor-intensive tasks. They're routine. They are performed daily by organizations far larger than Lorain with far fewer delays. I've seen it happen. It's an easy request. But hey, when weeks turn into months and explanation never changes, the problem is no longer technical or it's structural. It's intentional. Repeatedly, lawful requests for emails have been made and met with silence by statements that legal is waiting on IT is waiting on legal, or the request is under review. No estimated completion date is provided. No explanation of search parameters is offered. No partial production is, released. Even when the records are clearly divisible and could be actually produced incrementally. When I ask that, because I always eventually ask that, a timeline when you can incrementally produce them as you get them, so to speak. This matters because Ohio law does not allow a public office to delay production simply because it has chosen inefficient internal processes. Administrative inconvenience, not a defense. Staffing limitations are not a defense. Interdepartmental bottlenecks are not a defense. The obligation belongs to public office as a whole. That's it. Not to whichever internal department happens to be holding the record hostage at the moment. When IT is cited repeatedly as the reason emails cannot be produced, the obvious question becomes unavoidable. Are searches actually being conducted, or is IT being used as a neutral sounding buffer to create distance between the requester and the government, the decision maker, whoever? And that's because here's what never happens, folks. The city never says the emails do not exist once IT is invoked, right? It never says the search returns 0 results. It never provides an affidavit explaining the scope of the search. The custodians queried or the systems examined. Instead, it simply waits and waits and waits. That silence has consequences, folks. Public records are often time sensitive, right? A lot of these things I'm doing, they're for stories that I'm writing. They're for, things I'm working on. They relate to ongoing reporting, pending litigation, active public controversy. When emails are delayed for months and months and months, the story moves on without the records. The public never sees the full picture, right? Accountability is diluted not by denial, but by time. And it's not accidental, folks, because delay is one of the most effective suppression tools available because it leaves no obvious paper trail of refusal. On top of which, it allows them to trash your good name for months and months and months on end until they finally give you the emails. And then it doesn't matter anymore because no one's listening to you because you're already a piece of shit in their eyes. And so it serves to be worth stating that plainly that the emails on the city servers are among the easiest of their records to retrieve. The easiest. Unlike getting body camera footage, which may require redaction review or paper files stored off-site, emails are indexed, searchable, and exportable. And when months pass without production, it strongly suggests that the delay is not about retrieval, but about content. That brings us to the same question that keeps coming back. What's in those fucking emails that requires so much resistance from the law department, from IT, from Mary, from everyone? If the emails reflect routine administrative communication, and it can't be, how can emails about one citizen be voluminous? That's like saying I'm litigious. They could be released quickly. If the emails show disagreement, frustration, poor internal communication, it's not an exemption. If the emails show coordination between departments that later becomes controversial, it's precisely why the public has a right to see them. There's a deeper issue going on here, folks, that the city does not seem to grasp, or at least it doesn't want to acknowledge. The longer emails are withheld, the weaker any claim of harm becomes. If months pass without disclosure and no catastrophe occurs, it undercuts any argument that release would cause immediate or irreparable damage. The delay does not preserve privilege. It exposes pretext. That's it.
City IT is not a legal authority, guys. It does not decide what's exempt. It doesn't decide when records must be produced or not produced. It's an operational arm of the city, and its functionality is to support compliance, not obstruct it. When IT becomes the default explanation for compliance, responsibility does not disappear. It concentrates. The city cannot outsource its statutory duties to a department and then shrug when the law is violated, right? That's why this repeated IT-based delays are not benign. They are evidence of institutional tolerance for noncompliance. They signal to staff that there's no consequence for ignoring deadlines, no urgency in responding to requesters, and no requirement to treat public access as a priority. And that's where the culture takes hold. It is not stay confined to one office or one request. It spreads like cancer. That's why the same delay language appears again and again and again, right? That's why the same explanations are recycled. That's why requests are framed as impatient, unreasonable for expecting compliance with a statute that uses the word promptly. It doesn't say when convenient. It does not say after internal coordination. It says promptly. Without delay, they would say. What was it? I forgot the word they used in Mauricio's case now all of a sudden. If the city of Lorain cannot retrieve its own emails in a timely manner, then the problem is not the requester, the problem is governance. It's them, not me. It's not you, it's them. So we started talking about Dave Comer, and at some point, the city stopped treating this whole thing as a delay, the temporary explanation, and started treating it as this permanent excuse because city IT is not really a mystery. It's not a rotating cast of vendors. It's not an ever-changing department with institution memory problems. City IT in Lorain has effectively meant one name for as long as anyone can fucking remember, and that's Dave Comer. Like, Dave Comer's been the IT guy for decades. He's been here long enough that if anyone knows where an email lives or how systems are structured or how archives work or how searches are performed, it's that dude. He's been here long enough that if there was an institutional knowledge to be leveraged for efficient compliance, it would already exist. He's been here long enough that the idea that the city cannot promptly retrieve emails strains credibility beyond the breaking point. I mean, so when the city says to the public, well, we're waiting on IT, what it's really saying is the city's waiting on Dave Comer. And Dave Comer, by virtue of longevity alone, cannot plausibly be portrayed as overwhelmed by the novelty of this idea. He's not like new to the system. These are not unfamiliar tools. These are tools of his trade. It's not a learning curve, right? These are emails, government emails stored on government servers, searchable by sender, receipt, and keyword and date range. And I gave you all of those. I made this shit so simple, it's not even funny. The same emails that somehow become instantly searchable when litigation's threatened, subpoenas are issued, or internal interests require them, which is why the repeated invocation of IT as the bottleneck deserves scrutiny after all of this rather than any sort of sympathy. Because if the city wants to believe that a decades-long IT director who has survived multiple administrations cannot promptly retrieve emails when the requester is a critic or a whistleblower, but can do just fine when the city needs them for its own purposes, that explanation only works if no one is allowed to ask follow-up questions. And follow-up question that never gets answered is if Dave Comer cannot retrieve emails properly, then why is he still in charge of IT? If he can retrieve them but is not doing so properly, then who is directing that delay? Because the Public Records Act doesn't recognize institutional familiarity as a defense. It doesn't care how long someone's been in the role. It cares whether records are used promptly and lawfully. Longevity does not excuse non-compliance. If anything, it heightens responsibility. I mean, there's a deeper irony here that cannot be ignored. The city of Lorain routinely invokes IT delay as if it were technology were the problem, when relying on technology to run almost every other aspect of government without interruption. Payroll runs, ticketing systems run, databases run. Well, ticketing systems run illegally, but emails are sent daily. Records are created constantly. The system works until transparency is requested. Then suddenly the computers are slow. That's why waiting on IT has become like an explanation. It feels like a movie title. Waiting on IT. Next on the Holiday Channel. It's become more of an explanation than a shield. more like a shield, right? It creates plausible deniability for legal. It creates distance for the administrators. It turns a statutory obligation into internal issues, right? Scheduling problem. It shifts blame onto a technical function that the public is not equipped to question. But the law doesn't allow for the shell game. The obligation to produce records promptly belongs to the public office, not to IT as a department, and not as Dave Comer as an individual. If IT delays cause violations, the city's still liable. If IT is being used as a cover for discretionary delay, right? IT is not liable. It's the city. If IT is being instructed to slow walk requests, the city is still liable. And when the same IT explanation is used across months, across requesters, across administrations, the problem's no longer logistical. It's really cultural. That's how this institutional non-compliance becomes normalized. Everyone learns the script. Legal says it's waiting on IT. IT says it's working on it. Administrators, oh, it's under review. And the requester is expected to wait quietly while the clock runs out on relevance, litigation windows, or public attention. It's not how the law works, folks. That's how avoidance works. The city of Lorain wants to argue that its IT infrastructure cannot support compliance with the Ohio Public Records Act. It's admitting incompetence at a structural level. If it wants to argue IT can support compliance but chooses not to prioritize it, then it's administrating willful disregard. There's no third option. Oh, and when the same IT director has been in place long enough to have been there, to have been the guy installing the first city computer, the idea that this is a temporary growing pain becomes absurd. At that point, delay is not a glitch; it's a feature. I mean, this guy probably installed the first Commodore 64 or the IBM or whatever it was. I don't know. That brings us to section 6 here. We're going to talk a little bit about Brianna Dole, her charging decisions, and why certain records become sensitive only after they matter. Before we get to that, I'm going to do a quick pause for station identification. If you own a business and you want to reach customers right here in Lorain County and Vermilion, this is your opportunity, folks. Advertising space is now available in the Vermilion daily and agency radius. That means your business can reach local readers, local listeners, and a highly engaged community audience. And here's a bonus. For a small add-on fee, your business will also be advertised once per episode on my podcast, Unplugged with Aaron Knapp, as long as your ad remains active on one of those two platforms. This is web exposure plus podcast exposure in one package. If you're interested in advertising, contact me now to reserve your spot through Facebook, email, or reach out directly. Ad space is limited and local visibility matters, folks. This was an unpaid for. All right, that brings us up to the next section. We're going to go. Once you move past IT and in substantive records, right, the pattern sharpens instead of softening. That's where the delay starts about retrieval and starts being about consequence. Certain records are not slow because they're hard to find. They're slow because they explain decisions that no longer look clean once examined in sequence. And that's what you see across everything. Where Brianna Dole enters this picture is her name appears in matters all across the level spectrum, right? Affidavits, charging documents, sworn statements, and these later become central to the public scrutiny. And this isn't, these are not just administrative emails about meeting schedules. These are records that establish who said what, when they said it, and on what basis the government action was taken against an individual. An individual, not city, an individual. And that's where the city's posture always changes. It's where records involve charging decisions with people or sworn assertions. The response is no longer a neutral delay. It becomes a defensive one. Requests are routed differently. Review takes longer. Exemptions suddenly multiply. Language becomes vague. Timelines disappear. That shift isn't accidental. Charging documents and affidavits are supposed to withstand scrutiny. They're supposed to be sworn for a reason. They exist precisely because the government understands that the later review, not optional, it's going to happen. When a name appears on an affidavit, say Garen Petty's, or when a person signs a charging document, say Brianna Dole, Morris, that person's vouching for the accuracy of it under penalty of law. You know, when other people have filed charges against me and made claims, for the record, I ain't got 30 grand. That's crazy talk. When records related to the station or to those actions are requested and response slows to a crawl or not at all, the public is entitled to say, hey, why? But here's the uncomfortable truth. If everything was done properly, transparency would be easy. If affidavits were accurate, charging decisions supported, internal discussions aligned with sworn statements, then the record production of it would confirm the story rather than threaten it. And they'd be like, ha, take a look, right? But no. Delay becomes attractive because disclosure complicates the narrative and makes them look like asses. Sometimes it might make you look like an ass. I mean, honestly, when it makes me look like an ass, I'm proud. I say, look, yeah, I did that. I messed up. Thanks for educating me. And I've learned something new. But that's what I've been trying to do for the city all along, is say, again, what they should be doing, which is save from litigation. But they do it through their own acts. This is especially true when these charging decisions intersect with political pressure, administrative involvement, or after the fact rationalizations, right? Emails become dangerous because they are not confidential, really. They're dangerous because they show the order of operations. Who spoke first? And I friggin' hate order of operations, by the way, but it'll help you do math. Who suggested what? Who hesitated and who pushed? That's the kind of information delay is designed to suppress. What if one of those people was a councilman going off to become a state representative and they wanted to hide it? What if one of them had aspirations to be mayor and they wanted to hide it? What if a city council or a city official maybe was aspirations on mayor and a certain person started to annoy them a lot, caused them to have a guttural reaction to them in a city council meeting, and now they're mad because it might have messed up their chances with being a mayor? Here's where the city has repeatedly failed at the legal test. Ohio's Public Records Act do not allow an emergency to slow walk records because they retaliate or they relate to prosecution or charging decisions. There's no blanket, this looks bad exemption. There's no, this could be controversial exemption. There is no, this will raise questions exemption. If a record exists and does not fall squarely within statutory exemption, it must be produced promptly. Promptly does not mean after the public loses interest. It doesn't mean when or after the story breaks elsewhere. It does not mean after litigation makes withholding riskier than disclosure. It means without unnecessary delay. The pattern here is unmistakable with these people. Routine records are produced with moderate friction. Records that touch charging authority, sworn statements, or decisions-making power are delayed, filtered, or reframed. The same offices that claim administrative burden suddenly have time for legal parsing and multi-layered review, right? They can send it to everybody and their brother. That is not a capacity management issue. That is a risk management issue. And when those delays are paired with selective redactions, the problem kind of compounds itself. Portions of records disappear under exemptions that do not logically apply. Context is stripped away. Names and vanish under conclusions remain. The reader's left with these fragments that can't be fully evaluated. And I get it. In some cases, names are supposed to be redacted, but when the AG did it, it was one name. That was it, right? Like, not when other people do it. They block out whole sections. That's not transparency. It's curation. Looks like a World War II letter that's been gone through the War Department going back to the family. The law does not permit agencies to curate the public record to protect themselves from criticism, folks. It permits limited redaction to protect narrowly defined interests, not to sanitize narratives. That means like social, all these things, right? That brings us to this next unavoidable point that once records like these eventually surface, whether they're through a parallel request, accidental, or through litigation or changes in personnel, or the question really becomes retroactive. Why were these records withheld or delayed in the first place? That question does not seem to just go away because time has passed, right? You know, we're really looking into how it became a strategy. You have to go back and look at Levesque and the emails involving McCann, because that's where the denial crosses the line into from questionable to implausible. For months, the requests for emails involving McCann were met with that familiar language. No responsive records, no emails exist, nothing further to produce, request closed, end of discussion. That language was casual, it was deliberate, repeated, absolute, not we're still searching or some records may exist. It was categorical denial. That matters because categorical denials are not protected guesses. They are factual assertions made by public office under a statutory duty of honesty. And when an office says records do exist, it's representing that it has searched, confirmed absence. That statement carries legal weight. And all of these offices did that, from Ray Carrion to Bradley to the law department, from Michelle Becco to everyone. But then suddenly, curiously, after McCann retired, all these emails that supposedly didn't exist were given to me. Now you know they were false. All these people lied to me. So Bradley lied, Carrion lied, Becco lied, law department lied, Levesque lied, McCann definitely lied. The only person that's apologized to me for lying was now Captain Morse. Thank you, Captain Morse. Appreciate that. That's an honest man, at least on that point. Came back and said, I'm sorry, Chief lied to me. I lied to you. All right, touche, I take it. Here's where the problem becomes systematic rather than personal, though. This is not a case of records being overlooked in a dusty archive. These were emails, digital records, searchable records, records created and stored in a government system designed for retention and retrieval. They could have gotten them. All of them could have gotten them. So the idea that they did not exist until a personnel change occurred is not credible. So the question becomes unavoidable. Were the emails denied because they were hard to find, or was they denied because they were inconvenient to acknowledge while certain people were still in office? Timing matters, folks. Certain people say, I went after a chief of police. No, the chief of police went after me. I defended myself, as any one of you would have done. But hey, when denials persist up to the point of retirement and productions occur afterwards, the implication is not technical failure. The implication is discretionary withholding. Someone made a decision that it was safer to say no while they still controlled the process. And that decision violated the law. Of course, I don't think McCann ever thought I'd dump the Middlebrooks documents and he'd be gone, so we thought he was safe. Public Records Act does not allow an official to withhold records because disclosure would create personal or institutional exposure. It doesn't allow an official to delay until they are no longer the one answering the phone. It doesn't allow, it does not allow an official to gamble with a requester that they'll give up or just let it go before the truth surfaces. That's exactly what that sequence represented. It exposes why delay is so powerful. Delay is not the need to defeat a request permanently to be effective. It only needs to outlast the moment when the records matter the most. By the time the record surfaced, the damage was already been done. Reporting has been slowed. Narratives have been hardened. Accountability windows have narrowed. That's why eventual compliance does not rule compliance at all. By that point, no one cares. And that's why retirement does not erase responsibility. If records were unlawfully denied then while he was in office, the later production of those records does not cure the violation. It confirms it. It proves the denial was based on, not on non-existence, but on his own choice. That's what McCann did. And let's be clear about something else. Once those emails surfaced, no explanation was offered for the Uriel denials, right? Nobody said, hey, no correction was ever issued, no acknowledgement of an error made. The record was simply allowed to quietly contradict itself. Nothing to see here, folks. Move along. The silence is part of the pattern. Transparency does not mean quietly releasing records once the risk is past. Transparency means releasing them when they are requested, when they are relevant, and when the law requires it, regardless of discomfort. I mean, I haven't responded to a crap ton of my email requests, including records that tie, certain public officials to building things that have gone away here in South and Lorain itself. Records of all over the place. Records on Amber Brownish and Amber Smith's or Nancy Smith's case. All being denied, all being held back. What happened to the McCann emails shows exactly why requesters are forced to persist and keep going and go to the Court of Claims. It shows that the initial denials cannot be trusted at face. I can't trust them. They lied to me for a year and a half. Why the fuck would I believe a word they have to say? Why would you believe it? I mean, a certain person goes in and says, I could have done this and I could have done that, and he did this and he did that with no proof whatsoever, and you guys are willing to believe that. I don't violate the law like that. I'm dang sure not going to do it for someone like that. But it just makes you lose credibility. It's not about hindsight. It's about record keeping honesty and just credibility in general. You pair this with the city IT department's posture, the law department's gatekeeping, and the timing of personnel changes, the conclusion writes itself. These denials were not random. They were coordinated through structure, process, and authority from the mayor on down. Which brings us to the next layer of the system, right? The role of the city legal is not as compliance, but as, as a defensive barrier designed to slow, narrow, and exhaust lawful requests before they reach daylight, apparently here. City uses legal as a shield, and it doesn't have it's supposed to be a compliance office advising the city and the city officials what's going on. Half the time it's conflicted, and that's because it gets itself in the middle of all of these situations with Garen and all of them. And at some point it becomes impossible to ignore the city, the role that the city legal department plays in this entire structure, because the delays, the denials, the shifting explanations do not originate in IT, and they don't originate with clerks or records custodians. They originate with legal review that is no longer about compliance, but about containment. The law department is supposed to be an office that ensures the city follows the law, but under Ohio's Public Records Act, that role is not discretionary. It's affirmative. That means they don't get to choose to do it. They have to do it. Legal counsel is supposed to advise release when release is required. And that's supposed to go out, give it out. And then narrow redactions when redactions are justified. Oh, shit. Is that Rocky Social? You should black that out. Yeah. I can see everything through this. What is that? No, can't send this out. That's not what's been happening in Lorain. They've just been like, yeah, cool. Oh, Rocky, he doesn't matter. Assistant Safety Director Tim Williams, he doesn't matter. Send it out. Maybe they think that if we share it, that we'll somehow be in trouble, but that's not the case, because it falls on you guys, especially if we don't notice it. City legals function as a shield, though. Requests routed there not for guidance, but for delay, to deny, to die. Under review becomes the holding pattern. Legal analysis becomes the black box. The requester is left waiting while the city decides how exposed it feels, not how the law reads. And the most telling part of it all is the legal justifications do not remain consistent, right? 1 week, a record is withheld because it supposedly does not exist. The next week, it exists but is exempt. Later, it exists and is partially exempt. But then somehow, only after months have passed, and that it's not legal analysis. It's just narrative management. If the exemption applies today, or applies on a day 1, it applies on day 2 and on day 5,000. If the record exists, it exists on the day 1, right? The law does not change based on how uncomfortable disclosures become. City legal counsel has repeatedly blurred the lines between advising and deciding. The Public Records Act does not grant law departments the authority to override statutory mandates. Legal counsel can advise, or as they wrote, adviser. They can advise, A-D-V-I-C-E, but the duty to produce belongs to the public office, right? Always. When legal reviewer becomes the veto, the city is no longer complying with the law. It's rewriting it internally. And that's where the institutional culture shows itself. The law department doesn't have to go to these classes on Sunshine Act. The government officials do. The law department behaves as though the public records requests are adversarial filings rather than statutory entitlements. The requester is treated as an opposing party rather than a member of the public exercising a right. They get yelled at by Zaleski for running against Angel Arroyo in the election. It's not fair. He's running against Angel. Actually, Angel was running I had already signed up before Angel became counsel. I was running against Angel. Technically, he was running against me. He just happened to be filling in for Antonio. Every request is framed as a threat rather than a duty. Their posture explains the tone. It explains the resistance. It explains the absence of apology when denials collapse under their own weight. It explains why corrections are rare. When denials are proven wrong, the response is not acknowledgement. It's just silence. The system moves on without admitting fault because the admitting the fault part would undermine the shield. And this is also what we're being told implicitly or explicitly that we are the problem, right? It's easier to label the requester, Aaron, Garen, whoever else, as difficult than to admit the city has normalized unlawful delay. That it's easier to criticize persistence than to explain why months pass without production. It's easier to invoke legal review than to defend legal reasoning that doesn't hold up under scrutiny. It always comes back to those damn McCann emails. Those denials didn't come from IT. They didn't come from clerical error. They came from a legal posture that assumed delay would outlast the request. That assumption failed, but only because the damage, only after the damage was done. The city's legal role in that failure cannot be minimized. When law departments treat public records and law like something to work around instead of something to enforce, they teach the rest of the institution that obstruction is acceptable. IT learns to stall, administrators learn to deflect, and officials learn that silence is safer than honesty. That's how patterns become policy without ever being written down, folks. And that's the most dangerous part, is that this type of culture spreads like a wildfire. Once delay becomes normalized, no one feels under any urgency. Once denial becomes routine, no one questions it. Once requesters are framed as nuisances, no one feels obligation to explain themselves at all, ever. That's not how the public service works, folks. That's how private corporations work. That's how they protect liability. A city government does not have the luxury of acting like a corporation. It's bound by statute, by precedent, by the principle that transparency is not optional when public power is exercised. Which brings us directly to the human cost of this whole system, right? Because the delay is not neutral. Delay suppresses reporting. Delay chills inquiry. Delay protects misconduct by burying time. Delay reshapes narratives by ensuring that facts arrive later or too late to matter. And then delay is applied selectively to records that implicate authority, accountability, or retaliation. It stops being coincidence, and it starts being more fact. We start looking at, how these missing emails becomes an issue, and how every time the city of Lorain needs neutral sounding explanation for why records have not been produced, right, we end up in those same systems, archives, search limitations, old systems, migration issues, staffing constraints, all hovering over it. One name that stayed constant forever. He's been here for decades. And as I said earlier, they just seem to use him as a fallback now. The repeated reliance on him has just bottlenecked everything. They've gone months. I mean, I've gotten our IT guy is busy so many times, it's not even funny. If their IT is so fragile and bad that they can't even do basic keyword searches, then I don't know what they're doing. And they don't get to decide what gets released either. They don't even have a say in it. Technology does not develop an attitude on its own. People give it one. Dave Comer's position places him in a unique role. He's the keeper of the pipes. He controls access, retrieval, and timelines. And when a city needs plausible deniability, IT is working on it, becomes the perfect answer. Sounds neutral, sounds technical. It avoids admitting that the delay was intentional. And again, no apologies, no nothing. That pattern tells you everything you need to know. If the emails exist, then if they never existed, they'd never surface. If the system could not retrieve them, no amount of time would fix that. Yet again and again and again, emails that were supposedly unavailable appear later intact, searchable, and damning. That's why the delay was never technical. It was always strategic. And this is where IT stops being neutral and starts part of the accountability chain. Not because Dave Comer personally writes the denials, but because the infrastructure he controls is used to justify them. When a city leans on IT to excuse unlawful delay, IT becomes part of the mechanism that defeats that transparency. No one's asking to do the impossible. Public records requesters are asking for emails that already exist on systems that the city owns, managed by a department that has been operating continuously for decades. There is no plausible explanation for months-long delays other than choice. Slow walk, choice to deprioritize, choice to wait and see if the responder gives up. That choice has consequences, folks. If it trains staff that this delay is acceptable. It trains officials that silence is safe. It trains the public that persistence is required just to receive what the law already guarantees us. And it creates a chilling effect. Not everyone has the time, folks, the resources, or the temperament to push for months. Many of these requests deny, and they die quietly because they were invalid, but because the system outlasted the requester. That's attrition. It's not transparency. And if Lorain leadership wants to claim compliance with the Public Records Act, then IT cannot remain the black box. Timelines have to be documented. Retrieval processes must be explained. Delays must be justified contemporaneously, right? Not retroactively. And we're working on it. Cannot be, we hope you stop asking. Because when IT becomes the strongest, issue and shield serving City Hall, the problem's no longer technical. It is definitely cultural. And then now we're going to, move into one of our final few sections here. We're going to move on to the county. Lorain County, different letterhead, same playbook, right? We're going to do one last quick break, take a restroom break, and then we will be right back. But we're going to talk about Lorain County, different letterheads, same playbook. Stay tuned, folks.
Hey there, folks. If you really want to know what's happening in your hometown, the place to go is Lorain Daily and Vermilion Daily. From city council and school boards to local businesses, community events, and neighborhood stories, these outlets cover what the big media ignores. This is hyper-local news for real people in real communities. Visit Lorain Daily and VermilionDaily.com today. Read it, share it, support local journalism, because your community deserves coverage that actually lives here.
Unplug with Nap. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polish decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Nap. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polish decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Nap. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polish decoys. Broadcasting.
All right, folks. Thanks for giving that quick break there. But when you move from the city to the county, one of the biggest mistakes you can make is assuming that you're entering a different culture, right? Because you're not. What changes is only the letterhead, maybe the job titles, and what offices were copied on the email. What does not change is the posture towards public records. Because when those records they touch power, liability, or the internal coordination. At county level, the language becomes more polished, more procedural, more carefully buffered. But the substance is familiar. Requests are acknowledged, searches are referenced, exemptions are cited, requests are closed. And yet, the contradictions remain. Emails are acknowledged in one context and denied in another. Text messages are references in writing, but then declared non-existent. Records are said to have been fully searched, while later productions reveal gaps that should not exist if the search was actually done thorough as claimed. The pattern doesn't, scream incompetence. It whispers strategy. And that's a problem, because names matters here, because accountability does not survive abstraction. Eric Zambo appears repeatedly as the messenger of closure. His emails are polite, restrained, and final sounding. IT has completed the request, completed the search. No responsive records exist. Your request is now closed. Each phrase does important work. It places responsibility elsewhere. It suggests due diligence. It discourages follow. But evidence is not, our language of this is not evidence, right? Results are. When an office tells you that no emails exist between specific parties during a defined time frame, and then you already possess those emails that reference those very communications, the problem is not misunderstanding, it's credibility. Either the search parameters were inadequate, or the answer was chosen because it was convenient. Dan Petticourt's name comes up a lot. He enters the picture whenever the legal interpretation, video custody, or inter-office responsibility needs to be clarified without being resolved, right? In a courthouse video dispute, responsibility bounced between offices like a shell game. The prosecutor's office advised, the commissioners were custodians, the court issued instructions. Each entity pointed elsewhere, and the requester was left to guess who actually controlled the damn record. That confusion is not accidental, it's functional. The system that makes it difficult to identify the proper custodian creates friction. Friction delays production. Delay weakens accountability. And when the requester finally identifies the correct office, the clock quietly resets. That's what makes the county pattern especially concerning, is it mirrors the city pattern almost perfectly, right? The same denial phrases, the same reliance on CLEIRs, which they love them some CLEIRs. And the same no further records exist. Conclusions that later prove fragile under scrutiny. This is not coincidence. This is learned behaviors, folks. Another, county government is sophisticated enough to know the law, right? You would think. The Lorain County Prosecutor's Office does not accidentally misunderstand the Public Records Act. When it invokes exemptions, it should do so intentionally. When it closes requests, it does so with confidence that most people will not challenge the closure. Confidence isn't correctness. It's because you're confident don't mean you're right. That's all I'm saying. CLEIRs are, again, confidential law enforcement investigatory records. And they use this broadly, even when the record is not directed to the investigating law enforcement agency, right? Personal information cited when the redacted material includes government email addresses, sender lines, and routing data that's plainly public records. And when challenged, the response is often silence, not clarification. And that silence actually matters. Silence shifts the burden to the requester. Silence forces you to escalate. Silence dares the requester to file with the Court of Claims or walk away. Dare to go to the regular court or walk away. And most people do, because they don't have the time, the resources, the stamina to keep pushing. They're not a Berea with a lawyer like Rosenbaum who can go challenge the county for records for day in and day out, day in and day out. That's not how, that's exactly how this sort of pattern became entrenched in our government, both city and county-wide. The county benefits from something the city relies on heavy. Fragmentation of all these areas, right? Records are spread across multiple offices. One office creates them, another stores them, another advises on release. Each step adds plausible deniability to the whole process. Each step slows the process, and when the record finally surfaces, only through a different agency or after sustained pressure is there rarely any acknowledgement that the original denial was actually wrong, right? No correction, no explanation, just quiet compliance. Late or later. And yet this is what the county wants. When they want records from citizens, the standard's very different. Deadlines are firm. Compliance is expected. Ignorance is not an excuse. Delay is not tolerated. The imbalance is stark, and it's never acknowledged by the institutions that benefit from it. And by records and stuff, I mean, if you're in a court case and they want something from you, or if you're in a ticket and they want something from you, or your property taxes, or pictures of some damage that was done, anything, everything, they want it immediately. This is that narrative that requesters are difficult like me becomes useful. It reframes the persistence as harassment. It reframes my follow-ups as aggression. It reframes my lawful insistence as personal behaviors rather than statutory enforcement. But the truth is simpler. If the county followed the law promptly and consistently, there would be nothing to push against. No follow-ups, no disputes, no escalation. The friction exists because the compliance does not. The friction exists because the compliance does not. Again, the friction exists because the compliance does not. And that brings us to the most revealing comparison of all. Because when these same types of requests reach Ohio AG's office, the entire dynamic changed. No finger pointing, no shell games, no months of silence, just records. The contrast is not incidental. It exposes the local pattern for what it is. It's not confusion, not incapacity, but choice. I mean, dude, the AG, I'm going to just stop for a second and see the AG's office was amazing when I got those records from JD. And this was the first hint at when I started to realize maybe something more was going on when JD Tomlinson then met the eye. I know I get a lot of grief from people saying he still says this or that. Listen, we're all accountable for our actions. As much as I may, say certain things you're not accountable for, certain things you are. You still got to take some responsibility. Doesn't mean that you take all the liability. Now, is JD liable for his personal actions? Sure, but is he responsible for the actions of everyone around him? Not necessarily, especially if those people were sent to him with ill will or ill content. If somebody was related to somebody through campaign issues or any of these things, And again, if any of you people are taking anything I say about people's behaviors within the community, I'm just going off of contrasts and things that people have said out loud that I've heard from multiple people. None of it's factual. None of it means to be factual. All of it is just speculation and asking questions on what becomes political, informational / gossip show almost. But that brings us back there. Like the AG's office nailed that. They nailed it. They gave me the request super quick on JD. And to date, I can't get the sheriff or the county prosecutor to give me any of these documents, even though the AG's already given it, and even though the investigation is out of both of their hands, therefore ending the need of CLEIRs. It's gone to that prosecutor over in the other county. Now, here's a question for you. So when I was getting yelled at by our prosecutor Tony Solo and told it's not even, my decision about the prosecution, all this stuff with McCann, I was like, I agree. He made a point. He said, I don't do the investigating. The sheriff does. So I'll send it over to the sheriff and I'll call him, find out what's going on. Well, all right. Well, if you don't do the investigating because you're the county prosecutor, then why is the county prosecutor of Ottawa doing the investigating? Is he investigating or is he looking at your investigation? Which is it? Because he can't investigate. He has to actually have the sheriff's department there investigate you guys. So it sounds like you guys already did the investigation on your side and you just want him to review your investigation to make sure you're not being illogical or one-sided. But in reality, you guys keep going after the same guy. I mean, sure, yeah, maybe his choices cost $100,000, but how much has your choices cost us in legal defenses? Way more than that. How much has everyone's choices cost us in fighting all of these different actions that, spending money? I mean, dude, you guys are worried about JD's $100,000 when you just blew like $31 million in the span of 4 years. At some point, I have to start asking questions like, and again, I'm not saying that was right either. They made them fight so hard to get those records, like Berea and Rosenbaum should have gotten those records because they were being asked for. It's not about how uncomfortable it makes you feel. It's about, is it a record? That's it. But thank you, the AG's office, for really hammering that out. I don't know if I mentioned it in here. I wanted to originally, is that Ted Kalo's office at the Lorain clerk's office was very instrumental in providing all the MEHOG documentation and videos. And I thank them. They were very compliant in everything they did, as well as COC at the county courthouse has been very compliant with all their records compliance, as has the Mike Duran. He's been real good. Some people are great with public records. Some people do a great job. Other people need reminders. This contrast isn't incidental, though. It exposes the local pattern. And we look at Levesque's involvement with the McCann emails and the denials and how he kept saying they didn't exist. And suddenly they appear after McCann's gone. That's crazy. McCann's retirement, and then those emails suddenly became real, right? The moment where the whole narrative collapsed under its weight was because the timeline doesn't lie, even when people do. For months, records requests were involving James McCann. Emails were sent with familiar responses. Months, years went by. I mean, this occurred, it feels like in 23. No responsive records were found ever by any of the agencies that looked, from Ray Carrion to Levesque I go back to the records and look how many people lied and said they didn't exist, including the person who wrote them, James McCann, said I was reading them wrong. Searches that were conducted, they said no responsive. They just kept coming back and saying lie after lie after lie after lie. The denials were firm enough to discourage further inquiry and vague enough to warrant, to avoid accountability. This was not a one-time misunderstanding. It was repeated position taken while McCann was still chief. Then he retired. And then the emails that suddenly were previously denied, minimized or treated as non-existent. They just began to show up. The fact alone should stop the conversation cold. Emails did not magically appear because someone retires. Retirement does not create data. It does not restore deleted files. It does not change whether a record existed at the time of the lawful request. The Public Records Act does not contain a retirement clause. Records either exist when they're requested or they do not. And if they exist, they must be produced promptly. So when emails involving McCann suddenly become available after McCann is no longer chief, the questions become unavoidable. Where were those records? And were they actually missing, or were you just withholding them while he remained in power? Because one of those explanations is incompetence and the other one is obstruction. No third option, folks. And they weren't casual. These were emails where he was talking shit. Every denial that was issued while McCann was still in office must now be re-examined in light of what later surfaced, right? It's not hindsight, that's evidence. And if the emails existed after McCann retired, they existed before he retired. And if they existed before he retired, then denials issued during his tenure were false, incomplete, or intentionally misleading. That's not paperwork. That's legal problem. That's why the delay matters. That's why timing matters. That's why officials cannot be able to hide behind vague claims of searches, reviews, exemptions, and other records that eventually show up anyway. Delay does not neutralize the violation. Delay is the violation. But hey, while McCann was chief, they closed ranks. Requests stalled, explanations shifted. The same records that later appeared were treated as radioactive. Once McCann retired, the pressure evaporated. Suddenly, compliance became possible. The officers, the command staff, everyone there breathed a sigh of relief that the witch was dead and that power dynamics had been restored. The Records Act was precisely, exists precisely because officials can't be trusted to self-police when disclosure is uncomfortable. It exists to prevent exactly this scenario. And where records were withheld, someone remains influential and quietly released once that influence is gone. So when people ask why records requests feel adversarial, that's why. Because the law is clear, but compliance depends on who's sitting in the chair. And that's when retirement flips the switch. And you can't get around any of that, folks. These email systems aren't mysterious. Government email servers are searchable. They're backed up. They're indexed. They're retained with pursuant to schedules adopted by records commissions. All of this. Using these delays the way that they do is just illegal and unfortunate. But here's where the sarcasm writes itself. If Dave Comer truly installed the first computer in City Hall, then he certainly knows how to search an inbox, folks. The idea that months are required to retrieve emails containing specific names, dates, or addresses is technically, it's not technical reality. It's a narrative management issue. It's buying time. It's waiting for the pressure to fade. It's hoping the requester gives up, gets tired, or gets distracted by life. And I'm going to get the emails because I know that they say something bad. But that's not how Public Records Act works. The burden's not on me to wait you out. The burden is on the agency to maintain records in a way that allows them to give them to me promptly. Using IT as a constant exemption is not okay. The law department review, that's not okay. You can't keep using the law department as your full-on disclosure shield. Say, oh, well, it bottlenecks the law department and ends up back down, but everyone along the way says I'm not the keeper of the records, right? You guys have, exposed your entire city to me. You did this metadata thing earlier, 10 years ago, whatever. But now you're also dealing with all of the stuff you've been releasing to me lately illegally. But the greatest part, the greatest hits of denial language and how to use it when you're down is this part here. So the part where anyone who spent time requesting records in Lorain will start nodding, right? Get ready, guys, because the language will become familiar quickly. Not familiar because it's correct, but because it's recycled over and over and over again. They're like, if you'd like to make a call, please hang up and try again. Para servicio en español, número dos. Request after request, department after department, same phrases, same structure, same intent. Same first phrase. No responsive records exist. On its face, that sounds distinctive or definitive, clean, professional, case closed, except it collapses the moment you already possess the related records from another agency. So then it means that the search was limited, framed, or interpreted in a way that allowed the agency to say that sentence without technically lying while avoiding disclosure. It's denial by framing, not denial by fact. Then comes, second near close to it is his little close cousin. You're already in possession of all producible records. This one is especially telling because it quietly admits something important while pretending not to. It admits that records exist. It admits that records were produced at some point, but it also attempts to shut the door on follow-up by asserting that the agency has unilaterally decided what is producible, right? Not what is public, not as what is required by law. What they've decided is producible. The distinction matters because the Public Records Act does not vest that authority in that agency alone. Another one of their favorites is the request has already been closed. No explanation of why, no statutory analysis, no citation of a specific, explanation tied to specific content, just closure. as if saying the word would carry legal force. Closure language is not statute, right? It does not eliminate appeal rights. It does not cure unlawful delay. It's administrative punctuation masquerading as legal authority. And then there's the evergreen fallback of confidential law enforcement investigatory records that gets invoked like a magic word, even when the request is not directed to law enforcement agencies, even when the investigation is closed, and even when the information doesn't reveal techniques, sources, or safety risks. It becomes their blanket label instead of narrow exemption. When challenged, the explanation often shrinks rather than expands because the agency does not want to articulate what specific part of the record actually qualifies. Right? Another phrase that disturbs a lot is legal review ongoing. It's designed to be unfalsifiable. There is no deadline attached to it, no description or of the legal issue that's under review, just an acknowledgement that delay itself can be unlawful. And it's a holding pattern with no runway. Especially convenient because it shifts responsibility. Now it's on IT. Now it's on legal. Abstract entities that can't be questioned directly. Legal, IT, not Dave Comer, not Patrick Riley. And then there's the tone shift. That's where the professionalism starts to crack. Emails start to sound impatient. Responses become shorter. Clarifications are framed as burdens. Requests or statutory citations are treated like personal affronts. And at times, the implication is explicit. At times, it's subtle. But it's always there. You, the requester, are always asking too much. You are reading the law too aggressively. You are creating the work. You are the problem. Yeah, you, Garen Petty, you're the fucking problem. You, James, you're the problem. Aaron Knapp, you're the problem. Anybody else asking for records? You're the problem. It's not accidental. It's conditioning. Now everyone repeats it. Even if they don't know your name, they make up your case in the middle of a podcast and say every piece and fact of it wrong in regards to James. But hey, you guys are selling some good stuff out there. It's no longer about the language used. It's more normalized. And it becomes normalized, right? New requesters see it and they assume it's just how it works. Journalists hit the same walls and decide the fight's not worth the time, or they send me the request. Citizens give up because the process feels intentionally exhausting. That's the point. Delay is not a bug. It's the feature. And when you look at it, these types of requests reach the AG's office. The denial phrases disappear. The shifting explanation stops. The exemptions are cited narrowly. The production happens. There's no moralizing. There's no attitude. There's no suggestion that the requester is the problem, which tells you everything you need to know. The law didn't change. The request hasn't changed. The only willingness to comply with the requester has changed. And that's why it's not about me, and it never has been. If it were about just me, the pattern would be inconsistent. It would be personal. They'd just do it to me. It'd be messy. Instead, it's clean, repetitive, and institutional. The same tactics applied regardless of subject matter, as long as the records are uncomfortable. So why retraining? I think that's why retraining is really the right word here, because what's happened and what's been learned can be unlearned. The Public Records Act is not optional. It's not adversarial. It's not something to be managed under the law. It is the fucking law. And if agencies can learn to weaponize delay, then they can learn to stop fucking doing it. And sunshine laws exist to break that power because they behave badly in the dark. You know, they treat them as if they're a courtesy paperwork, a paperwork obligation, or administrative inconvenience later on top of real work, so to speak. Sunshine laws are not decorative. They're not symbolic. They exist because history proved time and time again, House or beyond, that unchecked power does not self-regulate. It never has. Ohio Public Records Acts are open meetings acts where they are not written because government always behaves well. They're written because governments repeatedly fail when left to its own internal processes. Humanity does. You know, that's why we have rules. That's why we have arguably a Bible. They exist because the public cannot meaningfully consent to governance if it cannot see how decisions are made, who is communicating with whom, and what information is being relied upon. Transparency is not about catching someone doing something wrong every time. You know, that's not why I stay up reading all these things. It's about preventing the conditions where wrongdoing becomes easy, hidden, and normalized. And that's where the law is written the way it is. That is why promptly is not defined as whatever is convenient. That's why exemptions are narrow. That's why the burden on the government is to justify withholding, not the public to justify access. Sunshine law matters because delay distorts reality. Records are delayed for months and months and months on end. Reporting's delayed, public understanding's delayed, accountability is delayed. And when accountability is delayed long enough, it often never happens at all. The news cycle moves on, the decision makers remain, the behavior repeats. It's not accidental, it's not structural. It's where the double standard becomes impossible to ignore. When journalists like Mark Puente or Mike Mason obtain records that expose wrongdoing, they're called investigative reporters and journalists. Their work is praised. Their persistence is framed as diligence. Their follow-ups are seen as necessary pressure on the system. When I do it, using the same statute, citing the same law, filing the same type of request, I'm labeled as a problem, a troublemaker, difficult, unhinged, obsessive. The only difference is proximity. When scrutiny comes from outside the system, it's easier to tolerate. When it comes from someone local, someone who understands the players, someone who notices the pattern across agencies, it becomes threatening. Not because it's wrong, but because it becomes effective. The irony is they never want. The irony here is that they never want acknowledged is that some of the most significant reporting outcomes tied to Lorain did not start with a grand investigation. They started with public records requests that were uncovered inconsistencies, requests that revealed contradictions, requests that forced explanations that were never volunteered. James McCann's records requests did not exist in isolation. They contributed to the chain of scrutiny that led to a broader investigations, including the Mihawk matter. The scrutiny and that in turn led to expose the systematic issues, including Lorain's traffic ticket problems that Mark Puentes reported on, problems that affected thousands of people, problems that had real financial and legal consequences. Those discoveries did not happen because someone was polite and passive. They happened because someone read the law, used it, and refused to be deterred by discomfort. That's why sunshine laws are designed to protect the process and the people. They're supposed to make it harder to hide patterns. They're supposed to make it easier to connect the dots. They're supposed to ensure when one agency passes records to the other that the trail doesn't just disappear like breadcrumbs being eaten by a foraging animal. They're supposed to prevent the very thing that keeps happening here in Lorain and Lorain County, where exemptions morph, justifications shift, and accountability gets lost between offices. When agencies treat sunshine laws as adversarial tools rather than structural safeguards, they reveal how actually they actually view us, the public, the people, not as owners of the government, but as obstacles to be overcome or managed. That's sad, folks. And that brings us to back to the core issue, right? It's not about tone. It's not about volume. Not about how fast I talk or how many emails I send. It's about how the laws applied equally and evenly. The government expects citizens to comply with statutes, deadlines, licensing requirements, ethical codes, and the government is obligated to comply with the transparency laws with the same seriousness. There's no hierarchy where enforcement obligations matter more than disclosure obligations. They are part of the same system. Sunshine law matters because they are the only thing standing between institutional memory and institutional amnesia. Without them, patterns disappear. With them, patterns become undeniable. And once a pattern is undeniable, the question is no longer whether the law is clear. The question becomes, is anyone intends to actually follow it? That's going to bring us to the final segment of our show tonight. Here we got about 12 minutes left. We're going to try to finish up by 2-hour mark. I'm going to give you one more quick ad break, grab a quick drink, and then we will be right back here to do our closing. And our closing is going to be why transparency, or this is what transparency should look like, and why it's being resisted so harshly by the
Here at Unplugged with Aaron Knapp, we like to thank our sponsors. We have a few unofficial sponsors tonight, and they are definitely not paid sponsorships. I want to throw out there a big thank you to Joseph Jones and Eric Jones of the Lorain Daily and the Vermilion Daily. They have a local news page. You should check them out. They do plenty of great work, broadcasting all the news that is the news that you want to have in Lorain and Lorain County. So check them out. Also, please, if you need any legal services, feel free to reach out to Robert Gargas. You can find him listed online. He's a fine attorney and comes highly recommended by yours truly. And last but not least, I want to mention DNC Radio. Please make sure you check out one of the up-and-coming internet hip-hop stations and all of their shows. They put on a lot of shows. You have the Never Outdone show. You also have the
Eric Bowen's show, Speak Up, Speak Out. So please make sure you guys check them out as well if you're looking for your latest and up-to-date hip-hop artistry.
Alrighty, folks, that brings us to our conclusion. Thank you guys for sticking in. For the two of you that are still here in the long haul,
we got 10 more minutes left, if that.
This is why transparency looks like, or what it looks like when it's resisted, right? This is where it ends.
Not with a slogan, not with a dramatic pause, not with an accusation that can't be backed up, but with the record itself, folks. Because the record tells the storyline, whether anyone likes the tone or not, folks. You've heard across this entire episode, it's not a series of isolated misunderstandings. It's not one bad day, one overworked clerk, one misread statute, one technical hiccup, one assistant, APA approved telling me no on something that, later after 5 or 6 denials will say yes. It's not just about the fact that they've released multiple social security numbers to me and addresses of people they weren't supposed to release unredacted properly or unredacted at all. It's not about the fact that they released police officer body cam footage to me unredacted. It's not about the fact that they care so much but care so little at certain times. It just blows my mind. What it's really about is the sustained pattern of delay, denial, and minimization, shifting explanations, and selective compliance that repeats itself across all these offices, across time, across personnel. Different letterhead, same tactics, different signatures, same results. From the sheriff's department to the county to the city to every township office that gets shifted up eventually to the county to Lee Prue. Because again, I will ask for some records from a township office and it ends up right back at Lee Prue's desk. How do you think I've been dealing with her so much? At some point, that delay stops being neutral. At some point, it stops being administrative friction. At some point, it becomes strategy. I mean, I got APA Prue so upset with me. She's talking shit about me. She's writing full-on complaints about lawyers, and then all she does is talk about me. That's insanity. The Public Records Act is explicit for a reason. It doesn't allow agencies to wait until scrutiny fades. It does not allow agencies to wait till the requester gives up or dies. And it doesn't allow agencies to slow walk disclosure until the damage to the public understanding is complete. It doesn't allow embarrassment, optics, internal discomfort, or any of those things, or fear of accountability to substitute for statutory exemptions. These are not carve-outs. Those are excuses, folks. And excuses are not the law. That's what makes this situation impossible to dismiss. Not my persistence. It's the contrast. When the Attorney General office receives a request from me, the law is followed cleanly. Like, exactly. And they gave out information to me that to this date, the county and the county prosecutor and the county sheriff disagree was public record. So basically, Tony Silla told me that, and the county prosecutor and the county sheriff said, what they gave you, they weren't supposed to give you. It's not public record. So they accused the Attorney General of breaking the law. And then on top of that, they turned around and had doubled that down by not giving me the very records they claim are still under CLEIRs when they've obviously given them to the Ottawa County prosecutor. And again, that's all the stuff on JD. I mean, again, seriously, guys, like, I know I went hard at the dude during the election. I was mad at him because he's part of the whole office with Petticourt and, look, he obviously probably got played too. I mean, smarter people than him and dumber people than him on all sides of the field have been played by people, yours truly included. So I think in some cases the real sin is to trust people, because sooner or later, even the people you hold dearest and that you think you trust end up betraying you. Even people you love, even people that are close to you, somehow, some way, oftentimes, incidentally or accidentally or purposefully betray you. It's never the hand that's furthest away that stabs you in the back. It's the one that you let close. But hey, when the Attorney General receives that request, they follow it cleanly. They don't give a shit it's me. Lee Prue does. Everyone else is mad they don't have any more of my licenses to attack. I let the CDCA go to I was supposed to renew it, and rather than pay to renew it, I just let it go to waste. Rather than deal with it being a weapon used against me by Tia Hilton. Oops. Gurmy. I miss my Gurmy. This is also where the narrative about me collapses, because it's difficult. People do not say thank you when records are produced, and I do. Problem requesters do not acknowledge proper compliance, and I do. Troublemakers do not cite the law accurately and consistently for months at a time, and I do. And no one's ever going to correct me on that. One thing that was said truthful in that podcast the other day is I do quote a lot of laws. Think about that, though. I'm quoting the law, reading the law, educating myself. I have law books back there. I read these things, right? Like, you should see the juvenile law book. It's like that thick. I could go grab it. I'm not gonna. I'm boring, is what I do. I sit here all day and I read. I don't have anything else to do. Before, I would work and then I would come home and read, because part of my whole workload is continuing education. And I graduated recently in 22. So yes, I do go at this with the enthusiasm of a first year graduate, second year graduate, third year graduate. I think everybody just saw the older face and was like, so yeah. But what all actually causes the friction that we're seeing here isn't aggression. It's my accuracy. It's memory. It's my documentation. It's my refusal to let yesterday's denial contradict today's production without comment. Because I'm not going to let it just not happen. Sunshine laws exist precisely because power prefers darkness. Not always for dramatic reasons, not always for criminal reasons, but for human reasons. Convenience, comfort, control. Those impulses do not make someone evil, but they do make transparency necessary. If public officials want deference, then they can earn it through compliance. If they want trust, they can build it through disclosure. And if they want silence, they shouldn't have picked public office. If they want silence, they should have never fucking picked on me. You guys can say you didn't, but you did. This is not personal. It's structural. I'm used to being the target of aggression. But the law doesn't belong to the city or of Lorain. The law, it doesn't belong to the county of Lorain. It doesn't belong to prosecutors, law directors, IT departments, or administrators. It belongs to we the fucking people. It belongs to everyone listening right now, whether they ever file a records request or not. Whether you like me, hate me, or love me, none of that matters. Because here's the final truth that no amount of delay can erase, folks. None whatsoever. The law applies to me, it applies to you. If the law applies to you, it applies to them. It applies to all of us. If I'm expected to follow it precisely, so are they, so are you, so are we. All of us. It's all or nothing. Transparency is not optional. Accountability is not conditional. Sunshine laws are not suggestions. They are the fucking rules. All that being said, folks, I want to say this is Unplugged. You've been here tonight with Aaron Knapp on Unplugged. I appreciate you sticking around for the full 2-hour podcast on transparency and records requests. If you need any extra information on records requests, feel free to check out my website, www.aaronnapp.unplugged, AARONKNAPP, unplugged, UNPLUGGED.com. And you can find on the back page a little section called Sunshine Laws. I have a whole little book kit thing, forms you can fill out, you can grab, that will literally you can use to send off. Since no one's really picked them up recently, I still have quite the free offer going on. If you want them, I'll send them to you as long as you like this little page I have going on for the selling of it. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't really care about the buying of it. I like the fact that on each one of them, it has a watermark logo that shows that I created it. And then you just be using my product every time you use it. So if you need those documentations, reach out to me. They're on my page for money, but I'll happily give them to you for free, including the book, especially for reviews. And in this case, just thanks for tuning in. I know maybe you might have thought I was going to go hard on. Listen, guys, I'm not personally angry at any of these people. I'm asking questions of all of these people. From government to, regular citizens abound. It amazes me how people think that it's okay to go on and make up fake claims about hits being on people. That's been proven to be legally defunct. She's claiming 911 calls. And this isn't part of my suit with the bar that I won't mention. So I can mention this part. Like, she's claiming that on the 911 calls that it talks about how, well, if you listen to 911 calls, he did it. Well, no, I'm sure what you would hear in a 911 call is these individuals calling saying they supposedly heard me say it. John Moreau wrote in a report that I supposedly said it, but he didn't show up to court. And then later, Aiden Fogel apologized to me, if not through an intermediary in person at city council, saying he knew I didn't do it. And I'm pretty certain he was the originator of the story to Heather, who then passed it on to the chief or 911 and all these other calls. Be clear to you guys, I'm not going to hurt her or anyone. I wouldn't hurt a fly. I wouldn't hurt Santa. You're right. Gito would kick my ass. All these people would kick my ass because I'm not going to fight any of you. I don't fight. Those days are long since over. To answer your questions, the disabilities I've provided to the city of Lorain, I'm not going to provide them to everybody, but I do have a tri-level neck fusion. So when any grab around my neck or any sudden movements or any jerking can cause nerve damage that can cause someone to fall and hurt themselves. So when you think about traumatic injuries and things that you don't see necessarily because you want to make fun of people because maybe they don't show them to everybody all the time. But in the grand scheme of things, you do something that causes a reaction that you don't understand, and it's because of their injuries. And either they did it that way or they would become violent. And when you hurt people and harm people, you don't know what their existing injuries are. I worked at a bar once, and back in the way back days, back when it was a saloon, right? And I'm just kidding. But I remember there was a guy that worked for us, and it was shortly we had rules about how you remove people like Patrick Swayze. People can come here to get ass kicked. They come here for a good time. And so this one guy got out back with the dude and fought with him and punched him, and the guy hit his head on something and died, and he got charged with manslaughter. Now, it's not always about your intent. What are you chewing on? Where'd you get that? Gross. Sorry, my dog was chewing on something. It's not always about your intent, folks. Sometimes it's just about what happens. And, when you go putting things out online, and we all chance having ourselves questioned. But what I'm doing here is hopefully for the betterment of you and society. I'm hoping that most of the information I'm giving is useful to you. This public records course today, tonight, whatever, you can take one at the AG's office and learn a lot too. But in reality, I'm not giving you a course. I'm giving you a crash course in how Lorain denies. One of the things that I do in my book is I go through all of the forms of denial language that they use. And that's all I've been seeing. That's why I honestly get why someone might see me as a troublemaker or, no, he causes problems. Like, I get it. I get why all these things happen. But it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm all.
I just want to remind people that your voice does matter, and people like that charge should not be in office, in my most humble opinion. Because he just gets up here and bashes a damn former police chief. So anyways, I'm going to finish what I'm saying. Anyways.
And yes, I am using this one piece. No. He causes trouble. Darn you, troublemakers! And I would have gotten away with it. It wasn't for them pesky kids. Bitch. I mean, come on, dude. You didn't have to say that to Jasmine. But I mean, again, I'm the kind of guy that can get these guttural reactions
and assure that
from
as part
people
of our
like
regular
this guy.
checklist that we have for many projects that we can visit this. This is not a common area because we typically don't waive fees. So it's one of those areas that we'll revisit here as we move along.
Thank you, Mr. Carrion.
Say something? Then why are
we?
Say something? Then why are we? You want to get an attitude? You work for me, Carrion.
Right. Oh, right.
Yeah,
Mr. Knapp, let's have
yeah, Mr. Knapp.
No, your employee is addressing me, sir.
This visceral reaction to me was beyond belief. That's how you tell that they've personalized this to me. I don't care. I don't know Ray Carrion. I know he sat on my porch and lied to me. He never followed through on the investigation. He claimed no emails existed when they did. He wrote a bullshit, fucked up report that by all means my 15-year-old daughter could have done better at. And on top of all of that, he still has the balls to ignore me. And he's the one that put Antonio Baez in illegally, supported him. Again, this guy is supposed to be all for the Sixth Ward. Great. Whatever. I don't see it. And other people like Miss Hilton want to be mad about the whole, like, oh, you did this. And for the record, I am going to correct this part. When it comes to my entourage, first off, James is not my entourage. James is a human being. James Mauricio is a person of color who was borderline, just kidnapped, unlawfully detained at minimum by a judge in this county. Say what you want about that fight. I'll forever consider that the best fight in my life besides the one for my daughter. My attorney and I, Robert, stood up for a man who could not stand up for himself. Now, you guys can say what you fucking want about that, but I'll lay that shit out multiple times, and I'll lay it out proudly. The man went in there for the first time without either me or Garen. Well, really just Garen, because I never went with James. I like James, but in order to maintain an arm's length distance so I can be an advocate, I can't go do these things with these people. That's why Garen exists. Garen goes with him to these city council things or the city hall to get these records so they don't mess with them. He decided that day, as all of us do sometimes, because we become bothers to people in our mind. He's asking us for help all the time. He probably felt like he was bothering Garen, so we didn't ask, so we went. He has a little camera on the front. Of course, he did what I do. Now, when I go in City Hall and I refuse to tell people where I'm going, they stop me and I stand right there in the doorway till the mayor comes down and gives me carte blanche to move on because, those little door guards, they do what they do. Now, after I'd already set that standard, he walks through, having seen me fight that fight with Mayor Bradley, walks through with his camera, goes up to the second floor. Now, if you watch one of his most recent videos, the one piece to all of this I didn't have was James's video. So I have the court's videos, and the court's videos show Mihawk doing everything that he did. But James' video showed something very unique. Mihawk coming out to the clerk's office and yelling at James. And that's where that whole put that on your Facebook came from. Now, for the record, Tia Hilton wanted to say online in front of Mr. Tucker's podcast that James, she didn't name him by name, but that James was sitting in the audience of a courtroom videoing the court. Well, first off, that would have been illegal. You're not allowed to do that. Without the court's permission, you can't just video or audio record in a courtroom. I believe you should know that, Miss Sultan, because rumor has it that you may have recorded some stuff in a courtroom before. But, the bottom line is that you can't do that. You can't record in a courtroom. That's illegal. And James knows that. All auditors, all people that are recording now to protect themselves know when and where they can record. This is why I'm so obtuse, according to James Horn, when I go into the city council meetings and make demands of these people. Well, they're not demands. They're requests to follow the law. And when James came in that building with a camera on that day, just like I now carry, because he inspired me to carry a camera everywhere I go. He had that little handheld camera thing. I got a little body camera that fits right here. The body camera goes there. I have yet to go down and test that theory with the city, but I don't really want to test it while Mihawk's there because I don't want to give a guy on his last day a reason to lock me up for 30 days. But that's what he did to James. James came in there to get paperwork on an appeal that he had been working on against Mihawk. It has nothing to do with me, right? Like, I like James. I followed James's case. I haven't worked on James's case. James's case is not the kind that falls in my purview usually. If you watch the videos, you should be able to piece together. James was out at his ex-girlfriend's house or girlfriend's house, God rest her soul, who's since passed on for different reasons. And she gave the officers knowledge that he was there for a reason. His issues revolve around very tiny, minute constitutional issues in your mind. In my mind, there were two big issues that Officer Payne or whoever else was there could have done that wouldn't have mattered, that would have covered their asses completely. And that was just wait till he got in the truck and left and then pull him over if you knew he didn't have a license. The bigger question of answering when someone's on the streets and you ran their license plate versus you walked up on them in a public place and not having had any information other than having been called on. There is the question he has about the keys and all these things. And I would be more likely than not to believe you over him if it wasn't for the fact that you guys have consistently proven yourselves to be liars. And it starts with your chief. Why wouldn't you be a liar, Payne, if Chief McCann was a liar? Why wouldn't, Morris lied because Chief McCann told him to. Admittedly, other officers have done so. So why wouldn't they lie for their chief? Why wouldn't they lie against James to arrest a black man here in Lorain? I mean, again, justify narratives. I've seen how many times James has been in front of Mihawk and in front of these cops in these courts. You don't think they don't know his name? You realize now when I walk up to a police car, the first thing they say is, "Good afternoon, Mr. Knapp. Good morning, Mr. Knapp. Good evening, Mr. Knapp." That tone's changed. It used to be, "What do you want? Why are you here? Why do you care? What does it matter? Give us this, give us that." I had to work all these years to get that kind of respect so they wouldn't disrespect me. But I guess if I'd have just grown up jacking my, you know what, with everybody else in Lakewood Park or Lakeview Park, I'd be fine. You shouldn't have to work for that kind of respect from the government or from government agencies. And if you guys believe that, then you're fucked up, more fucked up than I thought. When you guys come out here and you say these things to people like you say, when your daughter comes out and is annoyed with you because you're still on a podcast, even though you were trying to finish it up and you haven't finished it up yet, and she sighs. Like, all these things are difficult. Sweetie, what do you need? It's not going to now. Guys, I get it. You see me as the boogeyman behind every door. I get it. I feel like it sometimes. I feel like I try to make friends with people and I get attacked. Yes, I am suing certain people. If I could go through my emails and list to you what I really want to do, one of these podcasts, I'm going to list every time someone told me to sue them, from Bradley to Carry On to McCann to Tia herself to Patrick Horn. It's all anyone ever says to me. Well, sue me, sue me, sue me, sue me, sue me. Well, look, guys, it's either that or I go, what? Fisticuffs with you? We've already proven I'm not going to do that. In the same breath as saying I was swinging on all these people, even though I wasn't, and then being aggressive, even though I wasn't, literally let them beat the shit out of me. I've had the shit beat out of me multiple times in that incident, and somehow I'm the one at fault. I get it. You recategorize my behaviors as violent and aggressive, all while saying that any one of you could beat me down, including Miss Hilton, including Gito, including all these people, and I would agree. Gito would kick my ass. Hilton would kick. Every one of you would. Because I'm not going to fight you. I'm not looking to be the next Jake Paul. I'm not looking to put my untrained, unconditioned personage into these scenarios with a C-spine, T-spine injury, a tri-level neck fusion, a steel plate in my right ankle, neuropathy down my whole right side. And yes, I have TBIs from other incidences. So the brain damage that we're speaking of would have been caused through these incidences, and then a continuing on this, which is why I don't get involved in these scenarios, which is why I don't touch people and why I don't like people touching me. Why, when you grab someone by the neck, you might be cutting off a nerve that causes a person to have a reaction. I know this much. Doctors' reports don't lie. So I do have the medical records to prove that I'm disabled. I don't agree with them. All the time I try to tell the doctors they're wrong, and they just laugh at me. Listen, I know you said you fused my neck, but I don't believe it. I don't give a fuck if you believe it or not. I know you said that my whole right side is going to be jacked up for life, but I don't believe it. Did you believe it or not? Like, it's not Ripley's. I don't get to change that narrative. You also don't get to change the narrative that you don't get to manhandle people in your life. When Lieutenant Swanger came up and touched me, I thought it was assault, because in California, that is assault. In Ohio, it's not. That's why I initially stated it. And every place I've ever been, people want to touch you. Their narrative is that Aaron's a bad guy. Aaron has problems in bars. Aaron has this. Aaron has that. Why is it that maybe I'm just outspoken and maybe I'm not the one putting hits on people? Maybe people have been putting hits on me. Because I find it awfully strange someone no one knows suddenly is the talk of the town, that no one watches on podcasts suddenly is known everywhere they go. Someone that no one knows as their last name known by every cop in town. Someone who's unknown, who's basically a problem, who is a nobody. But yet the emails that, and again, I want you to acknowledge this. When I asked for the Mary Springowski and the law department emails, the one thing I didn't ask for was emails that I sent them or emails between them and me, or them and I. And so if I didn't ask for emails between Springowski and I, or emails between counsel and I, or emails between the law department and I, that should cut down a shit ton of email requests from Aaron, right? Because I'm the one sending all the emails, not them. Yet they're telling me now that Mary Springowski's emails alone are too voluminous to produce in the moment. Emails I've been asking for since August, September, October, November, December. Must that tell you, how is one city councilwoman using her city council email that mentions my name specifically that many times? The fact they want to send it to her, that's part of that final records check. They said, we're going to send it to her too. She doesn't get to choose what gets to be put in and what doesn't. She sent the emails, Hillary. You don't just get to smash the servers, bro. You got to provide the emails. You know, the same accountability you would hold a Trump to or any of those other people to, but you won't hold yourselves to that standard, Democrat Party. If you're so confident in your words, Mary Springowski, provide your fucking emails. Simple as that. You ran around telling people I was going to hurt you because I said I was going to confront you. You've stood fucking 5 feet from me in multiple places, and never once have I said a word to you or been aggressive to you. The only time we spoke was at your health convention when we were there, and I went there because you were introducing me to your health people, and I was hoping to vote for you against Mayor Bradley. And then I heard you use the infamous term, well, because they don't appreciate it when we're in the bathrooms, low-income areas that have been destroyed, and why we wouldn't fix them. And I had to ask who they was. That was my professional feeling on it. I just didn't want to do it after that. And I had your sign in my front yard. But I've never tried to harm you or anyone. The audaciousness that Tia goes around telling people that. Sweetie, I'm not the one going online saying, I have guns, I'm Second Amendment, I'm this, I'm that. I am Second Amendment. Obviously, I'm suing the city of Lorain over the gun law, but I don't conceal carry anymore. And yes, it was an accident when I showed up at your house that day. My brother was talking to that girl behind you, and you know that because you sent her text messages and cussed her up one side and down the other for supposedly bringing us there. And that was the biggest confusion of the day of our lives. Why would I want to go near, your nephew or your husband's uncle or brother? I mean, like, didn't he just today, or yesterday, get arrested for pulled over for being drunk and having a firearm? Christopher Hilton. I could be wrong, but I believe that's the guy that lives across from me that you supposedly said he and his dad were outside that day to confront me. And now that I look at his picture, it does kind of look like him. Imagine my surprise pulling onto a cul-de-sac street in a shitty little fucking trailer park that I didn't want to be in to begin with, to pick up and be the third wheel for my brother's date to go to Whiskeyville. And you live right down the street from him. Apparently you live right behind her and I didn't know it. I don't know these trailer parks. Trailer parks, I've lived in one in my life. It was a nice one next to Yahoo. They all have the same name: Spindrift, Bindrift, Pindrift, Pine Drift, Sand Drift, Ocean Drift. Everything's got the same goddamn name. I didn't know you were, and you weren't there, apparently, according to what you said. You told the girl that we went to see to tell us to come back. This is not the voice of a scared woman. You keep coming at me. Everyone tells me I'm the one that should be scared. I don't care. Honestly, that's what happens. That's what happens. I don't care what people think. I don't care if you think, yes, I did absolutely lose the fight at the madhouse because I didn't fight. There wasn't a fight at the madhouse. There was a video of Aaron getting the living crap beat out of him, and that was it. Just like in any other scenario, I don't fight. I'm not going to fight. Just because you yell at me, just because you scream at me, just because you try to fight me, doesn't mean I fight back. And Miss Hilton herself has even said that numerous times in these videos about me fighting, not fighting back. But that rolls back to their idea that I'm a troublemaker, I'm a problem, that Garen's a troublemaker, he's a problem, that Gargis is a troublemaker, that James is a troublemaker. Anybody that asks for records is probably a troublemaker. Anybody that... If you requested the amount of records people are requesting, I'm not the biggest person requesting records. There's 2 or 3 people that we don't even know who they are. And they're hammering Lorain consistently. What I can tell you is that the Lorain County and Lorain City are paying obtuse amounts of money for lawyers that they could put towards just giving us records. I mean, they're now, the county commissioners are suing the domestic juvenile court for forcing them to add a budget item in because they spent too much money. Anyway, if you guys want public records requests, help with them, if you need information, send it to me. I'm way overlogged and overbooked, but I'll be happy to send you a copy of my records book and some sample forms to use to get the records you need, because sunshine does matter and the government officials want to hide from it. So be lawful, not awful. Thanks for tuning in. Sorry I went a little bit over, but you guys have a good night, and we'll see y'all next time.